The Baltimore Ravens will go for it on any fourth down, and they will go for it in a season where they feel like they can make a run. And they did just that on Monday with the trade deadline looming. They go and grab Roquan Smith from the Chicago Bears, a player who had asked to be traded this offseason, and they get him for a second round pick and a day 3 pick to be conferred later. Joining me now from Locked On Ravens, Kevin Ostreicher. And Kevin, this is a Baltimore team that sits at the top of their division, at least as they're making this trade. They made the trade before we saw Bengals Browns on Monday night. So what specific problem do you think they're trying to address?
It feels like they're looking at depth right now, Peter, because obviously Roquan Smith is not a depth player. He is a star, an absolute stud, one of the best at his position, coverage-wise, sacks at his position, pursuit. He is in the top in all of those categories and more. But this just gives them more depth and more options on this defense. For a league that is trending towards those too high looks, Baltimore now has Roquan Smith lining up next to Patrick Queen. Yeah, Malik Harrison in that room, Josh Bynes as well. It turns a position where if maybe Patrick Queen has to miss a couple weeks, you're kind of looking at a thinner position. Roquan Smith can now fill in there, and those two can play off of each other really, really well. Plus, Roquan Smith is just 25 years old. There are some questions right now as to, is this just a rental or is there going to be a long-term extension? I think it's very valid. But at the same time, for a Baltimore team, as you mentioned, that's on top of their division right now, it's going to be very interesting to see if they make any more moves at the trade deadline. But this was a splash, and trading a second-round pick for the Ravens is a big deal because they value their picks in a big way. But for a player like Roquan Smith, it's absolutely worth it to part with a pick like that.
And the part that if you're wondering, well, why would you give up that much draft capital for a rental if the Ravens were to let Roquan Smith walk this offseason? They would get the compensatory pick, Roquan Smith, in line to get likely a lot of money. That could be a third-round pick. So you're really not losing that much value, even though that draft pick is going to come later, a year later than it would otherwise. So when you're looking at it, where do you cash out on this idea of, hey, this makes sense for the short term and the long term? Or are you going, I think this is mostly just a lottery ticket because he could be the missing piece on this defense that gets them over the top? And then if that's the case, you can decide to pay him or not.
Yeah, I think it's a little of both, definitely. I mean, this is a situation where if it is just a rental, there are a couple layers when it comes to it. We talked about this over on Locked On Ravens, but there is the compensatory pick aspect where the deal that he's going to get is more than likely going to net the Ravens a third-round pick if he were to leave. But that money that maybe if the Ravens made this move with, oh, we have an extension in mind for him, if he ends up leaving, maybe the Ravens use that money they had allocated towards a potential Roquan Smith extension for another big-time player, and that cancels it out anyway. So there are those layers to it, but in the event that he's signed to an extension, he's a guy that you can slide in on that defense as a star for years. It's not like he's 30 years old and just has a couple more years left in his prime. This is a player who is just entering it and is in it right now. A two-time All-Pro at 25 years old is no joke. And for the Ravens defense that has already been playing a lot better than early on in the season, we've seen adjustments and we've seen them continue to climb the ranks. This is in addition to a defense that I think is going to pay dividends. And it is absolutely a needle-moving move. Sometimes these moves are just pure depth move, trading a late-round pick here and there. But this is a move that moves the needle for them, especially after some really good wins and some heartbreaking losses. I think this will add more stability to a defensive unit that is looking to really turn it on during the second part of the season.
Yeah, the blown leads have been the story of the Baltimore season to date. They're hoping that it is a much bigger story when they win a bunch of games in December and January. But right now, the Ravens, 25th, adjusting for schedule in run defense efficiency, that according to Football Outsider. So this is certainly a spot where they could improve. To what degree do you think a player like Roquan Smith can buoy a run defense that in the AFC, I don't know, against Patrick Mahomes, against Josh Allen, like that's not that big a deal, but against some other teams, it might be. And you still need to shore up that kind of issue if you want to be a Super Bowl team.
Yeah, it is extremely important. Baltimore plays Cleveland again this year, who has Nick Chubb in that offense. And for Roquan Smith, he absolutely makes an impact in the run game, but he also is one of the best coverage linebackers in the NFL. And Baltimore has had an issue over the past many seasons covering tight ends at times, covering running backs out of the backfield.
You got to see Travis Kelce. You got to see Dawson Knox. There's plenty of guys to worry. Mike Gesicki if the Dolphins make the playoffs.
There are so many of those players that you have to have someone who can check them. And the Ravens they've thrown multiple players at him, Queen, Chuck Clark, etc. But now you have someone who can do that at a high level. And the key is do it consistently. So while he can provide that in the run game, provide the support that they need and free up guys, don't let guys get to the second level, the ability for him to pursue guys, the sideline to sideline speed. He was a freak at Georgia in the best way possible. He just went too far up, but it seems like Baltimore's always liked him a lot. They get their guy and they trade some significant draft capital to do it. So in my estimation, that to me signals they believe in him and they want him there for a long time. We'll see how it ends up playing out. But the fact that he is such a good player, adding into a defense that is going to get Tyus Bowser back, is hopefully going to get David Ojabo back, is going to get Marcus Williams back, it seems like at some point this season. They are adding players already, again, to a defense that is improving.
So here's what I'm wondering, Kevin. This is a team that has been a defensive identity team for a long time. But offensively, they trade Hollywood Brown this offseason. They're hoping for the Rashad Bateman breakout season, and they've gotten that to a certain extent. But this is a team that still could use plenty of help at pass catcher, even though they have a player at tight end in Mark Andrews who can be the engine of your passing game. Why not, in your mind, go out and get a high-level pass catcher, go and spend the assets on a Brandon Cooks if you could shake him free and improve your offense rather than trying to go for a player like Roquan Smith?
It is a very valid question. In my estimation, though, for me, it's always good to add good players to your football team, regardless of what position they play at. And I don't necessarily think Baltimore is done. Maybe this will come back to bite me or whatnot, but as we still have the trade deadline coming up, the Ravens could go out there and maybe make a move. With the Ravens not having their second round pick and the reports of the Texans only wanting to move Cooks for a second, that maybe seems like more of a pipe dream at this point. For me, though, I am very big on trades being needle moving trades. You don't want to just throw draft capital away if you can avoid it. In my estimation, Baltimore values it. So maybe they go out there and acquire a Kendrick Bourne or a Nelson Aguilar or Marvin Jones or someone of that nature to add on to a group, because John Harbaugh did announce on Monday that Bateman's injury is a bit more serious than anticipated. He's going to miss a couple of weeks, so we don't really know when he's going to be back at this point. He's missed the last handful of games. Devin Duvernay has stepped up. DeMarcus Robinson had a nice game on Thursday night. Isaiah Likely, when Mark Andrews went down, stepped up on Thursday night as well. So they have some talent there, but I think, again, like if Duvernay goes down, I think you're really in trouble there. So adding a pass catcher, I don't necessarily think, I think DJ Moore would be perfect for them. I don't see them parting with the draft capital, and it doesn't even seem like Carolina's interested in trading him right now. So maybe that's an offseason move, but I feel like Baltimore still could add a pass catcher as a trade deadline comes to a close here.
Let's say they don't add anyone else in the AFC. It seems like the Bills and the Chiefs, and maybe, by the way, maybe just the Bills in a tier by themselves, and then the Chiefs and everybody else. Where do you think Baltimore stacks up with those teams? Where do they stack up for you in the AFC hierarchy in terms of true contenders for a conference title?
Well, I think a move like this moves them up to 3. I still have them behind Buffalo. I still have them behind Kansas City. You can mention some other teams in the conversation as well. Tennessee is 5-2 right now. So you have other contenders, but the move of Roquan Smith, I think moves the needle for them and increases their ceiling, not just for this season, assuming he stays in Baltimore long-term, but for the future as well. And with the Ravens having a, by and large, pretty easy second half of the season schedule here. And there's been a lot of crazy football this year. There have been upsets left and upsets right. So it is really any given Sunday, but their strength of schedule plummets in the second part of the season. So I think this now, with 2 straight wins under their belt, now with that schedule coming up, I think they could string off and rattle off really momentum changing wins that could swing their season in the right direction. After losing 6 straight to end last season, we could maybe see a big winning streak to end this season.
Kevin, a pleasure as always. Thank you so much. For more on the Baltimore Ravens, be sure to check Kevin out on the Locked On Ravens podcast on Mondays, on the Locked On NFL podcast. And of course, every time there is a major Ravens story, he's going to be on Locked On Now. He's going to be on Locked On Sports today. Kevin, thanks so much.
Always appreciate you, Peter.